So the roundtable discussion is something that we do every issue. If you've seen the book before, you do know that. And the transportation issue in particular came up from a conversation that we had with the GGCC, and they're telling us that this is a major issue for Montgomery County as well as Frederick County. But for the sake of this conversation, I'm sure we're kind of focused on Montgomery County, although I will tell you, living up in Frederick, it's really just as big an issue up there, if not worse. Having said that, I think it's really important to recognize that the conversation, again, is really all about what we need to know. And I'm coming from a place, just so everybody knows, I'm coming from a place of ignorance where a lot of us are coming from. You guys probably know a lot more about this than I do, and I think that's actually not a bad thing, because I'm going to be asking some very basic questions. So let me explain who's on the panel, so we can at least introduce the people sitting. I'll start with Beverly, and everybody knows she is the secretary. Well, I'm sorry, am I supposed to say acting secretary? Or are you actually the secretary? You are. Okay, I couldn't remember. Okay. So the Secretary of Transportation, Beverly Swaim-Staley. We also have sitting at the table State Senator Robert Garagiola. Did I say it?
I do a lot of acting.
I was close.
That's good.
Good, okay. County Council member Mike Knapp. We have Parsons and Associates President Rich Parsons. Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce VP of Public Affairs Lisa Fadden. And Montgomery County BRAC Coordinator Phil Appleson. And so each person at this table obviously has some skin in the game regarding transportation. And so what I'd like to do is open up the discussion with a pretty simple statement from anybody who feels like jumping in. At this point, we're looking at really serious budgetary problems. We literally have the CCT, as well as expansion of 270, as well as a number of different metro expansion concepts that are on the plate, as you will call it. A lot of people, when I talk to them, when I interview readers and people who are interested, there's a huge concern about congestion and about getting up and down the corridor. 270 Inc. did an article on the 2030 group that's coming out in October, and stated by George Mason University, 94% growth will happen in the next 20 years in this area. A 94% growth is astronomical. Now, whether or not that's accurate, whether it's even a few percentages off, it's still a huge amount of growth. And so people in this community on a pretty regular basis are concerned, well, what are we going to do about transportation, given that every time we turn around we feel like we're losing money? So can anybody at the panel really speak to the idea that is there going to be an opportunity in government to address these transportation issues, and what does it look like? Maybe a state of affairs would be a great way to start this conversation. Maybe Beverly?
Yeah.
Maybe we can get Beverly to start. And panelists, please, I ask you, please do share the mics and talk into them, because we are recording.
Okay, very good. Well, the Department of Transportation, of course, right now, last week, we began what we call our annual tour meetings, where we go out and actually meet with all 24 jurisdictions. And obviously, to do that, we try to share as much information as we can in terms of the current state of play. And actually, I think after 2 years of being out on the tours with not very much good news, and in fact having to go out on the tours and talk about how we're reducing the program due to the economics, we've actually been very happy this year that we certainly see some good news to talk about, and I won't get into specifics, but in terms of the transportation sector, we're seeing the economy certainly rebound with regard to our revenues. We have seen some additional money from the federal government due to things didn't turn out to be quite so bad in terms of their allocations this year. We're very pleased to hear now from the President and leadership in Congress that they want to begin to address transportation authorization, which expired a year ago. And then we met on Monday with the Blue Ribbon Commission that was established by the legislature, led by the senator sitting next to me, to begin a conversation about how to address transportation needs. So I think that probably, I'm feeling as optimistic as I felt in a while. And although there have been some things we've been able to accomplish, which I guess we'll probably get to later. But I would say sort of in the current state, I'd say in the last 30 days that things, are starting to look like we may be able to address some of these issues.
Just kind of work down the...
Yeah, I would actually love it if all of you guys from your perspective talk
sure.
about a state of affairs, because I think that each person probably has a different perspective.
Sure. Thank you for hosting this and the chamber as well. I live in Germantown, practice law in Rockville, make the commute frequently to Annapolis, obviously, in my role as a state senator. I'm experiencing the same traffic that many of you do each day coming down the 270 corridor. I've been a MARC train user, a Metro user, so I've experienced other modes of transit as well, and have expressed probably the same frustration that I think many in the business community and many of our residents have expressed as well. Cursed at the traffic, et cetera. That being said, I think there's a couple things that we need to look at as we look at the long term. We need to look at, and I think that the Blue Ribbon Commission that's been established and had its first meeting, as the Secretary mentioned, this past Monday, is a vehicle to addressing some of these things. I think we need to look at, and I'm confident we're gonna do these things, both the short term and the long term. And the short term, obviously, with the economy rebounding, I guess now from a recession, really it's kind of sputtering along still, but having difficulty, obviously the last couple of years, that's affected the revenues, not only of our operating budget, but also our transportation trust fund. If there's less sales tax receipts, which we do get some funding for our transportation trust fund from the sales tax, or if there's less corporate tax receipts, or if there's less titling that goes on, those things affect our transportation trust fund, and as the Secretary mentioned, it looks like we're kind of rounding that curve, but we have a lot of unmet needs, obviously, and we're going to need some type of short-term solution to kind of get us over the hump of the next few years in meeting those needs. But then at the same time, we also really need to look at the long view, the 20, 30-year view, and I know we've done some of that, and you'll probably hear a little bit from other panelists in the land use planning, economic development, and Johns Hopkins has been part of that, obviously, as well as have many others. But that to me is a critical part of how we look at our transportation needs, funding for the future, and that link between kind of the land use, both from a environmental as well as smart growth perspective, but also from an economic development. Where do we get a good bang for the buck from a business as well as growing our tax base as we're looking the next 20, 30 years out, and what do we need to do in shaping our portfolio of revenue into the transportation trust fund, getting in place in the near future, but what should we be relying on? Is the gas tax, for instance, the long-term funding mechanism, or a big part of that funding mechanism as we go to the future? And I think that, among many related questions, are some of the things that this commission is going to be looking at as it makes recommendations over the next 2 years to the General Assembly and to the governor. And I'm confident that this is a commission that there is going to be action items from it, and I'm going to make sure, from my perspective, and I believe others as well, are going to make sure that those action items are followed through with as well. So I'll leave it with that. I'm sure there'll be a lot of opportunity for Q&A and to talk about some of these other issues as well.